I pledge myself loyally to serve my king and country
and to maintain the honour and efficiency of the Australian Army Nursing Service.
I will do all in my power to alleviate the suffering of the sick and wounded,
sparing no effort to bring them comfort of body and peace of mind.
I think it's incredible, that the nurses embodied that pledge so steadfastly, word for word.
The courage the Australian nurses displayed on that beach. The report was they were holding hands.
I don't think they could have conceived what they were going to face in any way, shape or form. If history uncovers that something is uncomfortable, we need to have the courage to engage with it and accept truth.
It's ridiculous, but it's all these years haunted me to the point where I could almost not talk about it without getting upset.
When you suppress a truth, it just exacerbates the pain and spreads it across the generations.
This had been known for a very long time. I mean, no one's ever talked about it. And unless you tell it like it was, you might as well not bother to tell it at all.
Truth-telling rather than myth-making. As a contemporary woman and a mother of daughters, there was no way that I was not going to turn over every stone I could to find out as much as I could about what really happened that day on the beach. And for me, that's justice for my great aunt.
Somewhere in here.
Yeah.
Okay, so this is a photo.
Oh. So there's this enigmatic photo of this handsome woman in an army uniform. I see a bit of a sort of mischievous, adventurous, rakish sort of... Later I heard from my Aunt Sally that it was my great aunt Bud.
I knew instinctively I was not to ask about that particular photo. Now, how I knew that, I can't tell you.
There was this really big silence and sadness in our family. And of course that was because Bud had died in the war.
This is the ration basket that Bud sent my grandmother, in which she put all the letters, every single letter, from the time she trained to the time she went missing.
So when I read the letters, Bud really came alive.
She was a bit quirky. She used to call everyone by names that were a bit strange.
Dear old Tumpy and Dad, thank you ever so much for the sweet pants and singlet. They are just what I wanted as I start duty on Tuesday.
Bud was a androgynous-looking, kind of gawky country girl from Cheshunt in rural Victoria. She signed up to be a nurse. Her friend Smithy said that she had a long, striding walk and she was decidedly awkward in anything but flat shoes.
Dear old Smithy, gosh, I'm glad that you have been accepted. By the way, did you ever hear from Billy Jones? Has she joined up yet?
There was a lot of our young people at the time that signed up to serve. I can imagine there's a romance to conflict. It feels like the right thing to do. I think Bud was a real adventurer, and I think she had a sense of wanting more.
Colonial Singapore, sweltering 1 degree above the equator island.
So they arrive in February. The Pacific War doesn't actually start till December, so they have some free time. They are treated like royalty almost, and the doors of colonial expat society basically are thrown open to them.
I went out again for dinner, came back to Raffles, and the chap I was with had to be on duty, so left early.
Yeah, she was very sort of general in her letters. She didn't want to worry them.
Yeah, plus there was the censor.
Sorry I'm a few mails behind, but have been fairly busy.
You're reading between the lines because you can track how the war is going.
The danger in Asia is explosive and acute.
At the moment, we are riding with 2 hurricane lanterns wrapped around with blue paper, as it's supposed to be a blackout.
Inside you're going, oh, because you know what's coming.
And then the letters cease.
So the fall of Singapore, as it got closer, our nurses were asked to leave. They declined because they were committed to looking after their patients. But then the nurses are directed to leave. So Bud was one of the 65 nurses at the fall of Singapore that boarded the Vinabrook.
The Vinabrook sailed on the 12th with close to 300 people on it. It was grossly overcrowded. It sailed for 2 days. On the 14th it was bombed, it was sunk. My own aunt, Sister Kath Noyce, was injured during the bombing.
Some of the nurses jumped into the water. Some of them can't swim.
Some of the rafts just get carried out to sea, like Caroline Ennis, who's the other nurse who also came from Cheshunt. She was cradling 2 small children and they are last seen drifting out to sea. They could see Bangka Island in the distance. Bud ends up on what we call Raji Beach, and they established a kind of, field hospital, and the nurses rostered themselves on. I mean, pretty amazing when some of them are injured themselves, but they really tried to care for the wounded.
It became pretty obvious to the survivors over the next 2 days that the Japanese Imperial Army had captured the island. There was no food, no medical supplies.
And they unanimously decided that they would have to hand themselves in.
They send a delegation to walk along the beach until they get to the Imperial Japanese to surrender as prisoners of war. But then the Japanese soldiers come and they separate the men from the women, and then the men are walked around behind some rocks, and it's only the Japanese soldiers that come back. And they're wiping the blood from their blades. One of the nurses turns and is reported to have said, "They don't take prisoners."
When I asked my mother what had happened to Bud, she said that they'd all lined up, held hands and walked into the sea. And one of the sister, I think it was, had said, "Heads up, girls. I love you all."
Peristiwa yang terjadi di sini selama Perang Dunia Kedua memengaruhi banyak orang-orang dari banyak negara. Kami datang ke sini bukan untuk membuka kembali luka lama, tetapi untuk menghormati.
Every year on the 16th of February, relatives of the nurses and people who were in the camps come together on Bangka Island, and this year I'm taking my daughters. Bud is their great-great aunt. So Bud was 27 when she was killed, and my eldest is 25. Not far off that same age.
It was kind of jarring being at a beach that was so beautiful, but knowing the history of the place. Mum had a little vial that she went and filled up with sand from the exact location where the massacre happened.
You really feel the presence when you're on that beach. That same sand where Bud and all the nurses stood.
When I first heard the story of the nurses and I guess their final moments together, yeah, it was really devastating, but also really beautiful at the same time.
The official story is that they motioned for the nurses to stand, and the nurses formed a line facing the sea, and that they all linked arms. And those who were wounded, they sort of propped up or carried. And then they started to walk towards the water with their eyes fixed on the horizon. When the water was almost up to their knees, The last words that they heard were Matron Drummond saying, "Chin up, girls. I'm proud of you and I love you all." And then a machine gunner opened fire and basically went up and down the line and mowed them all down, including my great aunt Bud. Well, I guess I did believe it, and now for me that version of the events has shattered.
Vivian Bullwinkel was the sole survivor of the massacre on the beach on Bangka Island. She survived because she was slightly taller than the other nurses. They were hit in the back, but she was hit just at waist level and the bullet didn't pass through any vital organs. And I met her down in Canberra in 1996. I was immediately struck by her vivacity, her outgoing nature. She's a wonderful lady.
Vivian Bullwinkel testified at the War Crimes Tribunal in Tokyo in 1946, and she testified about the massacre, how they were lined up and they were made to walk towards the sea, and how the machine gun went up and down the line and killed them all. New evidence has come up that contradicts that story.
I've been looking at this story for a long time, and my background in war crimes and investigations, I knew where to look. It made me then determined, when I found out that she'd been prevented from telling the truth, to put my reputation on the line to ensure that I could present a case which I believed had great validity. Eventually, I looked at Australians at War Film Archive, and up popped Frank Hughes.
We had an affidavit from Vivian Bullwinkel, which was highly secretive.
When he read the contents of that statement, he was horrified because she had apparently been quite graphic in what she'd said.
She was the only survivor. She was the only one except Japanese that would have known of the mistreatment that those girls suffered.
He informed his superior officers, and the decision was made that nobody in the War Crimes Unit in Singapore was to ever speak about it, and that Vivian was not allowed to ever mention it again, and that is what haunted her all her life, not being able to speak out.
Atrocities against Australians would have been information that the Australian public would want to know. So I'm just wondering, what was the political reason, do you think, for suppressing that?
It was known how it was that they were murdered, but it was their maltreatment that was not to be revealed. It was so shocking that the government felt that their relatives shouldn't be burdened by that knowledge. Vivian Bullwinkel stayed with that, and we were instructed that it should not be revealed.
The allegation that Vivian Bullwinkel had lied at the tribunal was actually brought out by a Japanese historian.
I started my research on the Japanese war crimes committed against the Australians in the early 1990s. I came across Vivian Bullwinkel's testimony she gave at the Tokyo War Crime Tribunals. I thought this is very strange testimony. She said that initially when the Japanese soldiers came, they separated nurses and British soldiers. Usually when they separated the men and women, they tried to rape women. So I thought this is a strong possibility that she was not telling the truth, and she and her nurses were raped, and then they were massacred, and somehow Bullwinkel survived.
Look, it's known that the unit of the Imperial Japanese at Raji Beach was the same unit that had performed horrendous acts in Hong Kong.
The soldiers belonged to the WWII battalion. They committed similar crimes against British nurses in the hospital in Hong Kong. They were raped and then massacred. So you naturally think a similar sort of crime was committed by the same soldiers. I just want to find the truth. That's my responsibility as a historian. I'm not going to accept any, stories covering up the historical fact.
The first accounts of what had happened on the beach came from Royal Marines and Royal Navy personnel, and yet it has not been taken on board. These were men who'd come ashore from ships that had been wrecked and sunk in the Bangka Straits. They reached the area where the nurses had been killed and found that footprints ran away from the water, and there were bodies strewn all over the place, some in a state of undress. None of these on the beach had been shot. They'd all been killed by the sword or by bayoneting. Bit by bit, more evidence appeared over the years. Vivian had 2 conversations with 2 women who didn't know each other. One was in Melbourne, Tess Lawrence, a broadcaster and ethicist.
Tess claimed that she had met Vivian in the early 1990s and that Vivian had confided in her that, in Vivian's words, most of us, meaning the women who had been massacred, had been violated, and that's the word she used, violated before they were marched into the sea and shot.
We often find that people who've been suffering trauma will never speak to their nearest and dearest or to anybody they know, but they will unburden themselves on a stranger who has a sympathetic ear and is listening.
I didn't know very much at all, except that I knew Vivian Bullwinkel was a real hero with the nurses. And yeah, in 1992, Vivian was invited to the Lewin officers' mess. When I went down there, she was standing by herself, so I went up and she said hello to me and I said hello back, and I said, "You've had an exciting life, haven't you? And, when is the book coming out?" And she said, "Oh, I don't know yet." She said, I'm waiting for them to print the truth. They won't print the truth.
Patricia Higgs asked a question that most people would not dare ask. She said, "Well, what is the truth?"
And she said, "We were tortured and raped before being walked out to sea and shot." And I think I was in such a shock that I didn't ask anything else.
Imagine trauma that Vivian Bullwinkel went through. Imagine her pain. I understand towards the end of her life, she wanted to tell the truth. The question we have to ask is why nobody gave moral support to encourage her to tell the truth.
I do choose to believe that any sexual assault victim has the choice to tell their own story. And for a lot of reasons, sometimes they choose to never share that. Vivian was the only survivor of whatever happened, and I haven't heard from her what her story was. And so I choose not to rewrite history.
Well, of course, the Japanese, Imperial Japanese forces in World War II, they're not the only perpetrators of war crimes and sexual war crimes. That's, it's been going on for centuries.
Sexual violence is absolutely a tool of war, and it's a power tool.
I didn't want to know these things myself, and so many times I really struggled and I felt so grief-stricken when I was looking into all of this, and I didn't want to know. I mean, who wants to know that these things actually happen?
I've lived with the story of the nurses and what happened to my aunt for pretty well most of my life. We'll never know the real truth. That's a fact of history. We'll never know. And I guess as a former lawyer, I take the view that on the balance of probabilities, something horrible did happen on the beach on that day. And I think it's incumbent on people now to really understand that and to accept that. There's a group that formed called the Friends of Bangka Island. The locals over there, after going back for over a decade every year, they're like family. They suffered as much as the nurses did in a lot of ways.
His grandpa hides
under the bridge.
Some of them remember the bombing, and some of the villagers remember that they heard shooting. Then they went down to their fish traps on the beach and they saw bodies, they saw dead bodies. They actually ended up relocating that village because they felt that the water was contaminated. We really didn't want brutality to sort of have the last word. We have something called the Walk for Humanity. We wanted something positive to come out of it, so this sort of act of positive defiance, if you like.
Walk into the water, none of us, we can't not help thinking about our relatives. We're almost in their bodies as well as we are in our minds. Were they joining hands? What did they feel when they walk in, knowing what was going to happen to them any moment?
I really remember being next to Philippa Dixon, who is Matron Drummond's niece. To be so physically connected to Philippa was really special. I think we both really felt that, and we had, a massive hug at the end. I just burst into tears, and she did as well. It was really unexpected to feel the significance of the story, not only through the generations, but across the families. Felt like we all kind of carried that grief together.
Sharing pain is very important. I think there's many ways. I chose the music. I think Georgina and other relatives of the nurses, they have to make a voice on behalf of their relatives. We don't need to hide anymore.
In my family, my father and my aunt would say they're glad that their grandparents didn't know, and they also think it's right that the truth comes out. The fact that rape was considered a fate worse than death, and also that the shame and stigma very much stayed with the families and with the victims.
Ask yourself the question. The girls had been maltreated. Is it any help at all for the parents, brothers, sisters, to know about that? I agree with it. I'd never reveal it.
I'd never thought of it, and it was just like, oh, thank goodness my grandparents and my mother really did not know that is what had happened. This is the return to sender one. My grandmother hadn't heard from Bud for a while, and so she wrote to her, "My darling little Bud."
My darling little Bud. Oh dear, I wish I knew where you are in the world. I suppose we will hear soon.
We hope to get a cow this month. It would be a big help. Goodbye, darling. No news. Right. All my love from Mum.
It's almost like a goodbye letter, isn't it? Yeah. The way that she says, goodbye, darling.
Yeah, I know. And then at the top she puts, "I don't expect you will get our letters," with a question mark. I mean, oh, I can't bear it. So sad.
So she wrote this letter on the 2nd of March and Bud died on the 16th of February. So she was
my
already dead
God,
when she wrote this letter.
But I couldn't have read that before. I just couldn't read it. It was so poignant. I love still to go up to Cheshunt, and I always think of Bud. I can picture her striding around, full of confidence, cheering everyone up. I think Cheshunt is where her heart would be.
There's going to be an unveiling of this bronze sculpture of Bud, but also of Caroline Ennis, the other nurse from Cheshunt.
To the family, the friends, the fundraising committee.
It really means something to the local people. It's really their gift to us and Caroline. I am the great niece of Dorothy Elmes, who was known to her family as Bud.
Understanding the truth has, to a certain extent, healed me. It's fantastic that Bud will not be forgotten. I'm very glad the story has come out.
I think it's easy to forget that she served and she nursed on that beach because we mainly talk about the end of her life as opposed to what she did. So I think it is important to talk about the fact that until the final moments, she was a nurse.
For my girls, I want them to know the truth. They're growing up in a very different world. There's no way that they would tolerate sexual violence being censored like that.
It's interesting because I think Freddie and I, maybe as a reaction, are very vocal about injustices, and we definitely don't silence ourselves nor want to silence ourselves. Silencing women's experiences of brutality makes me really angry. I think for us to progress in society, we just need to start calling things out.
I think we want our myths because they provide some solace. You know, they're probably a really healthy defence mechanism against what is so overwhelming. We're not wanting to take that beautiful image away from people. I think it's absolutely fine to remember the nurses' heads held high walking into the water, and it's really important to also know what actually happened.